Why hello everyone, how's it going? I just want to make a quick wee update here before I get into this video. I worked on this a long time ago, a little over a year ago now, and it's been a long time in the making. Through the year-long hiatus I was on, and through scripts, and through getting this sort of footage correct, it took a long time, and I don't want to really get into the rest of that. But we're all good now, all is on the mend, and we're getting there. So hopefully this video will hold up to the caliber of my other customs on this channel, and I really do hope that it brings the same amount of joy that the other ones did too. And now I have the absolute pleasure to hand over to my good friend Tommy for him to introduce himself.
Hi, my name's Tom, or Tommy, or TommyGee, or TommyGeeACBA, depending on where you find me. I make a load of Sonic customs over on my Instagram account. Much like Duck, I haven't been very active myself much this year, but hoping to make some more custom figure content this upcoming year. And any other content that you'd like to see. If you have any suggestions or like what you see in the video, my media links will be at the end of the video and in the description.
It was an absolute pleasure to get to work alongside Tommy, and without further ado, let's waste no more time. If you want to see Tommy's, this is the timestamp. Otherwise, let's get on with the show. Alright, let's see what Sonic merch they have. They have the giant Mecha Sonic, the giant Superstars boss battle. Trip's there too, which is cool. Superstar merch, you know, that's really cool. And what the... Nah, stop it. In 2025, there's a Werehog figure. Well, this is interesting. Kinda puts a spanner in the works for this video, but yeah, let's get into the video. So hello everybody, welcome. This is DoodleDuck97 bringing you a brand new custom in the form of my custom Werehog figure. Now this video is extremely backlogged, so this is a very, very funny video to make now, considering Jack Specific have made their very own Werehog figure, and at the time I didn't even know that this was going to be a thing. I don't think anybody did. I just got there before they did, which I'm quite pleasantly surprised by because it was like a couple of months before they announced it. The references I'm going to be using for making the custom Werehog, as you've seen, I'm sure you've seen it on my Instagram, it was the last post I posted for a few months now. I've got this bootleg Werehog here. We're going to use the 3-inch Jazzwares figure here as a reference point, same with the 5-inch figure and my previous Werehog figure that you'll also find on Instagram. That's one of my oldest customs. But yeah, we're going to start by taking off the legs, we're going to start by taking off the arms as well, and we're going to drill some holes in so that we can fit in Movie Knuckles' arms, because I already used the legs on the previous custom, and I wanted to try something different. I wanted to see if it could give it a better stance, give it better articulation. And just overall, I really like reusing parts. I don't like to kind of buy new figures to try and do things. I want to use the most out of the figures that I destroy. The same with this Werehog is going to use Mr. Incredible's arms, because I had this fodder Mr. Incredibles just lying around. Why not use that to make some really cool arms? And I've got a really cool thing that I wanted to do with it. Again, you've probably seen it on my Instagram, but if you haven't, it's going to be a surprise for this video at least. You'll sort of see I'm trying to match the scale of the Werehog's arm on the right, because I feel like it works for what we're going for, so I'm trying to match that, but also giving it that kind of beefy, kind of Werehog limb aspect. So this is where I just kind of glued all these sort of cut off parts together to give them that perfect kind of look. I always find I like to kind of test out that these are going to work, so that I know I'm not gluing pieces in that I then have to sort of tear off and rebuild again. So I'm just kind of testing out the joints here to make sure they will actually work. And if you don't find that they're working as well, you can always go back and Dremel in and make sure that they are stiff enough to hold poses, but also you want them to be loose enough that, you know, they're not too brittle and sort of break. Because the worst thing you're going to have happen during this building process almost is that it breaks halfway through. But as you can see, this is what I was left with. I then wanted to try and make this as symmetrical as possible, so that's a really hard task with hand sculpted stuff, is that you've really got to put a lot of thought into these things before you do it. So what I was basically doing here is getting it so the hand joints are going to have enough flexibility, but also enough room to hold poses that they look kind of almost flush with the joints. So the joints actually come from Knuckles' wrists, which... it's a bit of a waste of the figure, but I had a lot of fodder Knuckles left lying from other projects. So I basically wanted to make use of these things, because if you've got fodder, why not use it? See, here are both hands now with the articulated wrists now placed in and glued. And this is where we get on to my favourite part. This is how the figure is going to look. And this is the process I love doing, because I can see the vision now. Like, I can see that this is going to look good. Now another feature I really wanted to include on this Werehog that no other Werehog had is a almost hinge joint in his neck so that he can articulate forward, backward, left and right. So I had this perfect figure for that lying around. It's a Buzz Lightyear Disney Infinity toy box figure. It can lean back and forth and it can go left and right. So I was like, that's the perfect joint I want to use. And it's a fodder figure, so why not? So you'll see here I'm testing out that it can go back and forth in the body naturally, because there's no use in putting this joint in if he can't use the articulation that I'm wanting to put in. So as you can see, I managed to get the joint in. Basically I just cut away all the bits that I didn't need and then used the back panel as a kind of resistor, so making sure that it didn't fall out while I was trying to sort how it was going to look. And now we're moving on to the sculpting side of things. So the first thing I wanted to do was sculpt around the shoulders and the top of the chest, because that's going to be a nightmare if I was to sculpt everything else on. I want to try and hide the joints in as much of the figure's inner skeleton as possible. That's one of the beauties of this figure, is that it comes apart very easily, and I was doing things bits by bits. The head was 2 parts for the bootleg figure, which made it a lot easier to kind of work with because of the massive hole in the bottom side of the quills. That made working around the joint really, really good, so that I could just kind of manipulate it, sculpt it with relative ease using a knuckles joint. You'll see here too on this Mr. Incredible fodder that I tried out this air dry clay, and it worked really well for giving that kind of fluffy aspect around the sort of hands. So I thought, what better way than to try it out on the figure that I've basically decapitated and destroyed. I thought, why not try it out on this before I put it on the wrists and potentially make something that's not going to look good. But you'll see that the process actually went a lot better than I thought it was going to do, so I'm very, very happy with that. You can see the process of what I do here now when I'm sculpting. I usually smooth it down, make sure it's as smooth as I can possibly get it without sanding, and then we get to move on to the good stuff, which was sculpting in the fur texture, which I used the rest of the movie Knuckles that I destroyed from the previous Werehog and this Werehog. I thought, what better way than to match the same joints with the exact same sculpt that Jax used, because that's what I wanted to go for. I wanted to go for a Jax look of this figure, and I hope I kind of pulled that off in the results. At the same time, whilst I was waiting for that kind of parts on the Werehog sculpt to dry, I was also making the hands. So this is a really funny process of how I got that done. I used the 3.75 inch figure as a very much reference for the kind of fluff on the hand, because I wanted it to look as close to the Werehog as possible, whilst also maintaining that articulation, because if it's not got articulation, it's not going to do the poses and stuff that I wanted it to achieve. But I thought, why not use the already established sculpts from other companies to get this kind of look. As you can see, this is the kind of figure we were working with. This is more or less the final product, aside from a few sculpting in the upper head area and obviously having to glue that bit on top then. So next we're moving on to dyeing the joints and stuff. This was a learning curve for me, because it's the first time I'd ever dyed figures, joints and stuff, and it didn't go exactly how I wanted it, but it turned out pretty good, and it worked for what I needed it to do, because I needed the inner joints to look nice, because they always chip with paint and stuff. But this is what I was left with. It's more black than it was purple, and that's kind of my fault for, you know, being half colorblind and such. The next thing I did then was give it a coat of white primer, and it turned out pretty good, I must admit. I was pleasantly surprised by how it turned out, especially after the scare of thinking I'd messed it up. So this is how it looked. The head was still not done at this point, because I wanted to make sure that I had a few other things I was going to do with it, which I tried to give this Werehog as much, you know, features as it possibly could have, and that's one of the real joys of making this figure that I had. So as you can see, after I'd finished the sculpting on the head, I then reprimed the head, and this is what I was left with, and I'm pretty happy with it at this point. But I also really didn't like the shoes. I thought the shoes looked kind of crap, and they needed a bit more resculpting on them too, so what better choice than to repaint them entirely. So this is what the priming process looked like. The next thing we move on to was basically just painting the figure, and you can also see a little bit of the chip muzzle there that was part of the chip figure, which I've got playing in the top right. I really enjoyed painting the Werehog. There was a lot of blue. You know, the shoes being repainted again was a nice touch, because I feel like I missed a lot of details the first time round, but I just buffed up the sculpt a bit on the shoes, made sure they kind of looked a bit more, you know, symmetrical across the board, and I really enjoyed making this figure. It was a passion project at the time. I'm so glad I got it out when I did, because I would have lost all motivation after Jax had made theirs, because theirs was just like, you know, model quality. But one of the features I absolutely must admit I really wanted this was a switching mouth feature. So as you can see here, I'd already painted this one. I'm really proud of this paint job and the sculpt work on this. This is my favourite mouth sculpt that I've ever done. It was a really great thing to have, and there's no magnets involved. It is basically just a switching piece, like almost like the collector's figures that Jax makes. By this point I'd painted all the mouths, I'd sort of painted Chip up to, and we were moving on to the sealing process. So this is kind of the final part of this. It's very chopped together, all this footage, but I hope to go over that a little bit more in this final piece.
So you might be wondering where this second video came from. Well, this is a collaboration with Duck. My name is Tom, or Tommy, or TommyGeeACBA if you like. Though it wasn't intentional, we just happened to be working on our projects at the same time. And it was really fun to see how our processes lined up, even though they were quite different. For my Werehog custom, I wanted a more articulation than big cat's arms could give me, so I ended up using the legs of a McFarlane My Hero Academia Deku figure for the arms. It just provided that extra range of movement which I was looking for. Then I swapped out Sonic's hips for Silver's, because Silver's were wider and fit the silhouette better. And so yeah, you can see that in the video there. I also wanted to try and keep some hip articulation, although that didn't go so well in the end. Even though our approaches were different, it was amazing to see the contrast. Played around with the big arms at first, but eventually settled on the setup that you see in the video here. And then I started the sculpting process, and figuring out how everything would move was tough, but it was good. It was good to get my creative juices flowing, if you like. It was such a treat to work alongside Duck, even unintentionally. We were both just tinkering away in our spare time, you know, sharing our updates with each other, treating this as a passion project between the both of us. Obviously this was done before the Jax specific Werehog was even a thing, so we used the same, I believe the same bootleg Werehog figure that you may have seen floating around as a base, but with our different spins. It was just funny how we both did it at the exact same time. Fate, one may say. And that there is the chip that I made. He looked good for a while, but you won't see him in the rest of the videos and the shots. I used a red dye to help with those joints. So I used a 2.5-inch classic tails as the body, and sculpted the rest. Used a red dye to try and get those joints red, but unfortunately that dye started to leak in some of the painted white areas, so he's currently sat in my fodder bin, unfortunately. But with that, here is my completed Werehog custom. It was a really fun project to work on, and I hope the results show the work that went into this passion project. If you like what you see, check out my socials and look forward to what's coming up this upcoming year.
I hope you guys enjoyed that. Really hope that we can collab again soon, dude. Thanks again, and let's waste no more time and get into showing off my Werehog custom. As you can see, I'm just setting up the 5-inch and the 3.75-inch from Jazzwares, because they were massive inspirations for this. You know, I've always loved these figures since the day they released. And here is prototype 1 of my Werehog custom. Now this thing looks really daft. You put him in a T-pose and he just basically looks like a human model. He almost looks like the E3 costume, which you'll see here on the screen. He looks very daft, and it's really ridiculous to see now, but I love him all the same, and without him I wouldn't have been able to make a second version. These are the figures that I used to make this specific Werehog, and I must admit I love him all the same. Without him I wouldn't have been able to make my current Werehog, and you know, he still has a special place in my heart, as ridiculous as he looks. He always, you know, will be one of my first customs. But nothing can compare to what I can honestly say was my magnum opus. Like, I'm loving this thing. I went through a process of not liking him, and I thought he wasn't great, but he has everything that I wanted him to have. All the articulation points that he could have. You know, I haven't actually counted. I'll put it up on screen how many he actually has, but he's got so much articulation, and this head joint is one of my favorite things that I've ever implemented in a figure. Like, it really truly encapsulates the Werehog to me. You know, you can put him in a lunging pose, you can have him like this falling from the earth, or falling into the Earth's core when he's fighting the Egg Dragoon. There's a lot of posability options here with this Werehog, and I'm just thrilled that I was able to make a decent looking Werehog after the attempt from the first one. And as you can see here, this is the Jack's official Werehog. We're going to do a bit of a comparison against mine later in the thing. I'm honestly, you know, in two minds about it, especially with the open hands. Like, he's so cool. I'm so glad we've got a Werehog figure in 2026 at this point. I'm definitely in two mindsets about this. But, as you can see here, this is how it was revealed to us at first. This is how it appeared on the American side of things. They got it in a 3-pack, obviously with Supersonic, Werehog, and Soap Shoes Sonic, or according to the back of the box here, because we for some reason aren't calling it Soap Shoes, it's the Grind Shoes Sonic, which I don't understand. I don't know what's going on with that. But we have almost an Unleashed pack, and it's really cool that this is how it was released. I prefer this pack over the other pack, which we got here in the UK, which is a single release. No accessory with this figure, which is really weird considering every other Jack's figures comes with something like a spring. Even Big came with a ring. But yeah, this guy didn't have anything. He's classed as an exclusive, you know, and that's something to take on board. Here you can see I'm just showing off the back of the box where it says the Werehog's description. You can pause the video and read it if you wish to. But yeah, it's weird seeing this because this was released alongside Trip, and obviously the first release was released alongside Fang. So it's really weird how these came out, and I must admit, like, I prefer the US version, I really do. But now let's take a look at a comparison between my Werehog and their Werehog. So they both have head articulation. The Werehog from Jack's can kind of go back and forth, but the hinge joint on mine allows mine to go a lot further, and that's something that I really wanted, if nothing else, from this figure. He's obviously got the elbow, shoulders, and wrist articulation, albeit that his wrists are on hinges, whereas the Jack's version has the exact same, but the hands rotate instead of the wrists, which is a really weird thing, but I guess that's the only way they could get the, like, tufts of fur to work. You can also see here they have the leg, knee, and a really cool ball joint on the ankles, which I am very jealous of because it looks really, really dope. Like, my one obviously just has a knee and a leg, and this kind of almost seized up ankle articulation. The one thing mine does have, though, because I don't like how the Werehog's face is, it has a switching faceplate, which is something that I really, really wanted to get on this figure. I wanted to get that right too, because I wanted to have as much options for this Werehog as possible. You'll see that there was a third face, but I don't have it on hand at this current point, so there is a picture on screen of it just now. The final piece to this Werehog that I haven't shown off anywhere else, and this was an exclusive part for this video, so it's taken a long time to really reveal it, was that I made an extension arm for him so that he can just basically extend his arm out by 2 more ligaments. It looks a little bit goofy, but the attempt was to try and give him this kind of lunging aspect. You know, in the game he obviously has this extendo arm, if you will, and that's the whole point behind his, like, transformation. Instead of having fast speed, he has this exaggerated limb aspect, which you can see here. This is kind of like the slashing attacks from the game. You could also make a punch effect for the punching effect, but I never chose to do that in this project. You can also see here the cleats. I did have the details sculpted in to put them in there, but to get them all symmetrical was a really hard task the first time around, so I chose not to do it this time. But that's one thing I'll give the Jack shoe over my own, like, it definitely has that aspect down to a T. But now we're going to take a look at the other little Sonic Unleashed custom I made. So here's the first Werehog, we all know about him, he doesn't look great. This is Chip, and Chip, again, doesn't look great, but the first version of him, it looked a lot worse, I must admit. This is the second version of the revised Chip face. As you can see here, this is the first attempt, and dear lord, like, he didn't look great. Let's just throw him over here, let's get him out of the way. Next up, we have the talking point of this whole video, the Werehog that we've just worked on, and all his accessories and such that come with him. And hopefully this Chip looks a lot better. He has seen better days, I must admit that. He's lost a wing in the process, but you can see I put a lot more effort into this Chip than the previous one, and I really hoped that I could get this mastered perfectly. He's not model accurate, but he has his own charm, to me at least, and he uses the current elbow joints that I now use for Sonic figures, as opposed to this previous video, which you can see here, slight plug for myself. Instead of Android joints now, I use these joints for the elbow joints. So I thought these broken ones would do perfectly for Chip, and you can allow him to change out his hands. And he also has multiple face plates, but I lost them, much like the Werehog one, because they were just such tiny pieces. Now let's move on to the official Jax figure. As previously mentioned, this thing came with absolutely nothing, so we have to talk about this little guy. This kit was made by Tito the OG, my good friend, painted by yours truly here, but I must admit, this thing's absolutely perfect. It's the perfect accessory for the Werehog, and it should have come with Werehog, but I'm over the moon. Thanks again for sending me this over, dude, because he turned out fantastic, I hope. And I hope I did your kit justice. So yeah, here's all three next to each other, and obviously 2 of these weren't made by me, but the other 4 were. And I definitely think I've improved on myself, if nothing else. And here they are, next to my custom Professor Pickle. I think he looks fantastic. I still stand by that. And this kit was printed by Scrubby and painted by yours truly. Another fantastic kit that just makes Tails look perfect. And what would a Sonic Unleashed custom video be without the chocolate chip Sundae Supreme, which I made using Cream's accessory being the ice cream. I think this looks fantastic for what I did at the time. You know, I'm really proud of it for being such a small accessory too, and it fits perfectly in Tito's chip kit, which I think is just perfect. It's a brilliant lineup of figures, and I'm really happy with how these turned out. And yeah, that's the complete custom video. It's been a bit of a long one. We're going to send it over the glamour shots now and a few screenshots I took of the figures. If you like what you see, please like, comment and subscribe, and leave in the comment section what you'd like to see from me in the future. I want to make a lot more content this year, so any and all suggestions will be much appreciated. Thanks again to Tommy for collabing with me on this project, a taste for the theatrical for the lovely emotes at the start of the video, and Tito and Scrubby for their kits. And you guys, the viewers, thank you again. Without you folks, this wouldn't be possible. So you take care, and you have yourself a damn good one. We'll see you in the next one.